Problemista from Julio Torres. It's a comedy about an aspiring toy maker seeking sponsorship from an absolute monster. In this movie, we follow Alejandro, played by writer and director Julio Torres. He's in the US on a soon-to-be expired work visa with hopes of getting a job with Hasbro Toys. He has a very limited amount of time to find a sponsor, so he takes a chance with Elizabeth, played by Tilda Swinton, who's an utter nightmare to deal with. But he decides to play ball with her and help her put together an art exhibition in exchange for her sponsorship. This movie playfully depicts very real struggles with immigration being at the forefront, but at its core, I think this movie is about the struggles of being a starving artist. It's about a young man with a burning artistic passion nurtured by his mother. He wants to turn that passion into a career, and he is willing to jump through the many hurdles of the immigration process to do so. But as it goes for any artist trying to catch their big break, he also has to go through the many hurdles of people much larger than him acknowledging him and giving him a chance. In a way, the same could actually be said about Elizabeth. She needs a place to host her exposition to display her art made by her cryogenically frozen husband. So Alejandro and Elizabeth are polar opposites, making them a very interesting pair. Alejandro completely lacks charisma and has a lot of very soft traits, while Elizabeth is just very angry and impossible to deal with. Not only is she completely insufferable, but even worse, she projects her ugliest qualities onto everyone else around her. For example, she is constantly yelling at other people to stop yelling at her when they are speaking in a completely normal tone. Tilda Swinton was perfect for this role, though they probably could have done a better job de-aging her for the flashback scenes. It was all done through makeup alone, so she kind of just looked the same age. But Elizabeth is someone who is notorious for seeing the worst in everything. If we're being honest, she's really the type of person who just wants things to be upset about. This was occasionally a bit too much though. It obviously makes sense for her to stay on brand, but the constant yelling was just getting a bit exhausting to watch because she's incapable of talking without yelling, and boy does she talk a lot. But neither her nor Alejandro are perfect, and they actually kind of help each other out. Alejandro, in a way, tries to show her how beneficial it is to maintain composure, and Elizabeth, despite being a horrible example of how a human being should behave, shows Alejandro the importance of having a backbone and being stern. Because that's Alejandro's biggest flaw. He's just too soft. You'll see that very quickly as he struggles to put himself out there because of his complete lack of confidence or strength. So Alejandro sees things through a very animated lens. The way he sees things is often depicted on screen through these very absurdist bits. The perils of navigating the US immigration system is a big part of the movie. It's depicted as navigating a maze where you can't get through a door without the key, but the key that you need is on the other side of that door. During his time awaiting sponsorship, he does a lot of odd jobs that he finds online, and this is depicted as him talking to this otherworldly psychedelic being who is reading off those job listings to him. There's also some good commentary on other struggles, including the senselessness of bank overdraft fees and how they claim to protect you, but really they're actually just there to profit off you. So if you've ever experienced these hardships before, then this will certainly be relatable. What's interesting though is how humorously these very dark struggles are depicted. The tone of the movie is very playful. That's mainly because of the demeanor that Julio Torres brings to this character. Despite these hardships typically being stress-inducing, Alejandro is just awkwardly handling them like, oh no, I don't want to get deported. There's also some occasional voiceover narrations that were pretty funny. I almost want to compare their comedic effect to the narrations in Arrested Development. I do feel a little bit reluctant to say that because the type of comedy in that show is substantially different from this movie. The only parallel I want to point out there is the contribution of the voiceover narrations. It's also just funny how he has to navigate this impossible to please sponsor. He indulges her obnoxiousness because he needs her. So he has to do things like figure out how to use a primitive software that literally nobody uses, really leaning into that stereotype that senior citizens aren't very tech savvy. Alejandro's ideas for toys are also kind of silly. They're very meta and arguably just unconventional. For example, one of them is a toy car with a slowly deflating tire. That way the kid has to play with the knowledge that they have a limited amount of time with it. For better or worse, the set design is pretty indie. This takes place at a lot of junky looking places. There's a lot of white walls and dated architecture. That could just be because of budgeting constraints, which would also explain the lack of better de-aging on Swinton, but I wouldn't say that the set design was bad. Similarly, the production quality of the very animated bits of Alejandro experiencing hardships felt pretty low budget, but this was a solid filmmaking debut for Julio Torres. The things that felt low budget didn't ruin the movie, and this was definitely a huge stepping stone for his film career. He's clearly very creative, so with time, I'm sure that he'll be given bigger budgets from studios that will allow him to make even more wonderful movies. Overall, this was a pretty fun depiction of some not so fun troubles. This movie's good. If you're looking for something silly and unique to see in theaters, then look no further. But if you prefer high budget, big IP popcorn movies, then this one might not be what you're looking for. Thank you for watching this review. If it brought you any value at all, please consider giving it a like. It really does help the channel grow. I'll see you later this week with my review of Roadhouse.